an award-winning woman in construction. Our next guest is here to tell us about her journey so far and some of her biggest passions and inspiring role models. To tell us more, please give a very warm welcome to Timm, Technical Director and Structural Engineer at AECOM, who is also the 2021 award winner of the Women in Leadership Award at the Big Five Women in Leadership Awards. And now to moderate for us, please give a very warm welcome to Grace Mpai, Technologist of Structures at AECOM.
Thank you so much, Laura. As you mentioned, I'm sitting with Timm, the recent winner of the Big Five Women in Construction, Women in Leadership Award winner for 2021. Kim, welcome and congratulations on your award once again.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it, and it's really nice to be able to sit with you here today.
Cool. For the audience, the format of our conversation today will be a question and answer session where we will be getting Kim's perspectives on a range of issues, including effective leadership qualities and her role as a mentorship champion within the industry. So with that in mind, I think the award is a good place for us to start. So Kim, what did it mean to you to win this award? And why is it important for one to be recognized by the industry?
So, to be honest, I was completely speechless when I found out I'd won the award. When the nominees were originally announced, I did a little bit of time on LinkedIn looking up all of the other nominees, and I was completely blown away by the caliber and quality of the people that I saw there. They were a wide range of different people: architects, engineers, project managers, contractors. And each one of those people in their own unique way were doing their best to make the world a better place. So to be honest, I hadn't given myself very good odds for winning initially. So I was speechless when my name was announced. In terms of the importance of recognition, it can be a tricky one because I know that Women in Construction Awards sometimes pick up quite a lot of criticism in terms of people saying, well, we don't have men in construction awards, and why is it important to have women in construction awards? But I think you can't underestimate the amount of good that it does for women to see other women just like them succeeding within the field. You need to be able to see successes in order to be able to have hope for the way forward. And in the last month, I've had quite a few people come and talk to me and say that since the award, seeing that gives them a little bit of hope and enthusiasm for the future of the industry and makes them want to stay in the industry. So to my mind, if an award is achieving that kind of thing, then it is very much setting out to achieve what it wants to.
Fantastic points there. So you were recognized as an outstanding leader. And as you mentioned, the other finalists are all well-deserving in their respective fields. What is it about your leadership qualities that you think stood out to the judges?
Well, when I started work, there was a notable lack of engineers, especially in the range 5 to 15 years older than me. This tended to mean that I was thrown into situations early on that, certainly from my perspective, I thought was a higher level of responsibility than I was ready for. And for quite a long time, I suffered from, I guess you'd call it, imposter syndrome, where you keep thinking that everybody would suddenly realize that you were just making it up as you went along, or identify you as a fraud. And despite this, over time, I learned to have a little bit more faith in myself, and that helped me become who I am. Now, when I'm sitting on the other side of it, more on the leader side, invariably we try and correct the items or change the items that we had trouble with when we were going through the same system. So I like to try and work on a trust basis. So I trust my team, and invariably something will go wrong. There are always problems. There can always be mistakes, but your team needs to know that you have your back. You have their backs, and I find that my team as a whole, because they know that I will look after them and trust them, they tend to work very hard in order to support me and they not let me down. So it becomes a bit of a mutual environment. At the same point, I think for me, one of the important things in leadership is to have a little bit of empathy and realize that you are actually dealing with individuals. So while I might refer to my team as my team, each member is an individual and they each have their own things that they're going through. They have their own preferences and their own way that they like to be led. And understanding a little bit more about those unique individuals and how to work with them, I find helps me be a better leader for them.
Wow. So from my years of knowing and working with you, I'm aware that mentorship and empowerment is something that's close to your heart. So how does AECOM, as the organization that you work for, support the empowerment and mentorship of women coming into the industry? And perhaps you can also describe for us how the success of those initiatives is measured.
So that one's quite easy. AECOM has lots of different initiatives in place, and they tailor for slightly different groups of people. So one of the women-based ones is a group called M Circles, and it's effectively a mentorship system, but it's also it's not a mentorship system which has true mentors and mentees. It's rather groups of women which are connected with each other throughout the organization, often from different disciplines within the overall built environment and at different stages in their lives. But these groups meet, for instance, my group meets once a month, and we talk about all sorts of things. We share stories, we help each other. If somebody's going through a bad time, you give support. It almost becomes a little bit like a work family, and it really does help to be able to have speak to other women within the organization. And it's you certainly our entire group feels that we are stronger working together. Then a different initiative that AECOM also has is not necessarily women-based, but looks at all of the young graduates, and that's their candidacy mentorship program. Now, this system pairs up various graduates with mentors. So, for instance, I've got several graduates within the system at the moment, and it allows a framework for effective communication between the mentor and the mentee, as well as teaching other things like softer skills and one might even say a professional practice kind of approach. So things that you might need to learn in the field over and beyond how to design a beam. And I think this particular candidacy scheme has gone quite a long way. They've worked quite hard on improving areas and trying to be the best it can be. And we're starting to see the success now in the large number of graduates which are going through the system and registering professionally. As an example, at the moment, there's a scheme that we're running where you actually have simulation projects. So at the moment in South Africa, largely due to COVID, the construction industry is not as busy as it was a couple of years ago. And therefore, our graduates get the opportunity to work on these simulation projects where they can actually take on a role far more senior than they would be in a real project and have an opportunity to make the decisions and make mistakes and then learn from them under supervision of more senior personnel. So I think looking at those two different systems, the M Circles and the candidacy, they're just a fraction of the way that AECOM assists in putting that kind of training and support in place to make sure that we can all keep developing.
And if we expand that a bit further out, how are you collaborating with the industry, the rest of the industry on the inclusion and diversity? And what are your key takeaways on what the industry as a whole can do better?
So I've been very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to speak at a few conferences and seminars quite recently. So at the FIDIC Africa Infrastructure Conference a couple of months ago, the recent SAICI Inclusion and Diversity panel, as well as a couple of others. And I must say I thoroughly enjoy the inclusion and diversity panels because from the discussions we've held, you can see also the popularity of the discussions. Diversity and inclusion is a very hot topic at the moment, and it's one that people feel passionately about. Everybody has an opinion and want to share it. And often that leads to a robust and healthy discussion, which is very important. It wouldn't work well if we all agreed with each other all the time. I think from my side, my key takeaway from that is I'm a naturally optimistic individual. So for me, what I'm taking away is actually hope largely for the industry. Because as a whole, you can see from the way these topics are being handled and how often they're coming up that we want to do better as an industry. There's a clear need for change, which is becoming more and more aware to the industry as large. And while we may not be agreeing on all the details and practicalities of how to achieve that change, we at least are seeing more and more people acknowledge that that change needs to happen. So for me, I think it's a matter of finding that common ground, agreeing that we actually are all agreeing on the overall points, and then working the practicalities as to how we're going to get to where we want to go.
So for our male audience members, what advice would you give to the male champions in the industry on how they can empower their female colleagues and support inclusion and diversity?
So sometimes, and I'm going to make a couple of sweeping generalizations here because it clearly doesn't apply to everyone. But sometimes we don't give our male colleagues enough credit. The construction industry is still a male-dominated environment. We, as women in the industry, need to make sure that the men are on our side and championing women's rights just as loudly, if not louder, than the women are. Yet, sometimes we can come down very harshly on our male colleagues who actually are trying to champion the women. Sometimes we can call them patronizing and rude. And again, sweeping generalizations. But while occasionally people are being patronizing and rude, most of the time when I've been in those situations, our male colleagues are trying to help. They just don't necessarily know how to help. So for all of the men in the audience, I think firstly, thank you for being here and thank you for listening, because that's also an important start. So if you want to help and if you want to try and see how you can assist in making sure that we end up with more inclusion and diversity within the industry, I would suggest that communication is really the best way to break down the barrier. Find a woman in the industry that you trust, that you know is not going to take offense if you say something the wrong way, and honestly talk about what to say, how to say it, and what you both see as the problems. And if you can then reach a conclusion in terms of little things that can be done, even to help sway general understanding, every single little piece of help helps. Women aren't trying to take over the built environment. We're not trying to kick all of the men out of it and claim it as our own. That would be somewhat ridiculous. But we need to work together and respect each other and reach a common ground.
So, and to the future Kim Timms in the audience, what advice would you give to the young female professional construction workers coming into the industry?
Well, I'd say don't give up. Sometimes, especially in the beginning, the industry can be hard. Sometimes you will want to cry. Sometimes you will cry. That's okay. That's not a problem. Sometimes you feel lost, and frankly, that is also perfectly okay. But it does get easier, and it's one of the most rewarding possible industries that you can actually be in. Find yourself a mentor, someone that you can trust, but can also tell you hard truths when you need to hear the hard truths. If you work hard and you learn to trust in yourself, then you'll find it's going to be worth it. There's something incredible about seeing something that you've been a part of right from the early stages in design turn out to be a reality in front of you. You can really feel how you're changing the world for the better.
You mentioned mentors, the importance of mentors. So who are the people that you look up to and regard as inspiring role models in your life and career?
So, well, yes, I love mentorship. For me, it's one thing to solve engineering problems, and that is very important, and it's fun. Being able to have a resolution to a tricky problem is very satisfying, juggling all the normal priorities, time, money, everything else. But for me, mentorship is always one of the key things. I love giving guidance to the young graduates and, frankly, learning from them myself. So directly linked to that, then role models. I think there are two role models that I'd like to mention. The first one actually is a lady called Alison Lawless. Now, she was one of the first women to graduate as a civil engineer within South Africa. And she graduated at a time when a lot of universities weren't even accepting women students into them. So she managed through the entire course of her career to be respected, not just because she was a woman in the industry and to pioneer that from a South African context, but also to be respected as an engineer and a very good engineer in her own right. And not content to just be that person already pioneering as a woman in engineering, she then made mentorship a priority for her entire working life, and she still is. And that, for me, very much strikes a chord because it shows the importance of being able to give back to other people as well and make sure that the industry as a whole grows. The second role model is, for me, probably a lot more cliched, but it doesn't make it any the less true. I'd say my second role model is probably my mom. She's always supported and encouraged me. From a very early age, she's taught me that I should believe in myself, trust in myself, and not really get caught up in what boxes other people try and put you into or what labels they may give you. And I think for that, I'm always truly appreciative.
Thank you, Kim. Do you have any final words for the industry leaders, the future leaders in the room about inclusion and diversity, perhaps?
So I think probably a final word in particular to the women who may be listening. So yes, our industry can be a challenge, but personally, I'm a firm believer that the only way we are going to manage to change the industry is that if each and every one of us is the absolute best that we can be. It's very hard for people to say that women cannot be good engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, contractors, if we are proving again and again, simply by being there and being the best we can, just how good women can be, and how professional a woman can be as an engineer, an architect, a project manager, a contractor. So if we can each be the best we can, then to me, that's the simplest way of proving that the naysayers are wrong.
Thank you. That's the end of the question and answer session. To the audience, the floor is now open for any questions you may have for Kim. Thank you for joining us.
Well, a fascinating discussion, that one. Thank you so much for women in construction. Thank you so much to Kim and Grace again. And thank you to Kim for staying with us for our audience questions. Now, we've had quite a few come in again, of course, but I just wanted to run through, some of your key themes that you went through just now, understanding people individually, empathy, stronger together, wanting to do better, and also, communication to break down these barriers. So leading in from that, the first question that's come in is, what do you think is the biggest change you've seen so far for women in your industry so far? And what has been the biggest impact of that change as well?
So I think for me, one of the biggest impact or one of the biggest changes has actually been relating to the sheer numbers of women that are entering the industry now. They still aren't anywhere close to where we would like them to be. But when I started work 20 years ago, on most of the construction sites I went to, the contractors hadn't met a female engineer before, so they weren't entirely sure what to do. Should they hold my arm while they helped me over reinforcement, or they weren't sure how to manage it at all. So I think we've come quite a long way from that point. Now, at least, it isn't something that you have to repeat yourself. If you introduce yourself as an engineer, you don't get a double take. So I think based on the fact that at least now across the industry, people are becoming more aware that women engineers are here and here to stay, that makes it a little bit simpler to be able to springboard each person's individual journey. It gives you a slightly smoother path if at least people are aware that you can exist in that way.
Well, another question has come in, and actually you touched on this earlier very nicely. What advice would you give to younger males coming into the industry with regards to supporting their female peers?
So, men in the industry are very important. If you are starting out and you're not sure how you can help, absolutely the first thing I do is say, listen to the women, listen to your friends, listen to your colleagues, and actually pay attention to what they're saying. As an example, you'll find a lot of the time that the women in the industry, sometimes there are difficulties or hardships that as a man in the industry, you don't get nearly as much. So as an example, harassment, it is something that you'll find a lot of women in the industry get harassed on a regular basis. I mean, I myself have had in the last month and a half 2 different individuals in a professional platform in a professional environment giving me, I'm going to go with the phrase, unwanted messages. And it is, unfortunately, it is something very real that women have to deal with on a very regular basis. It isn't something that happens to other people or is far away. I think if you actually engage with women that you work with on a regular basis, you will find that they have, to a greater or lesser extent, experienced those kind of problems. So when they come to you, when they say, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable for the following reasons, or would you mind helping me in this way? And listen to them. Don't say that they are the ones causing it or that they must be misinterpreting it. Just give them the support they need and the understanding, and help where you can in those environments.
Very good advice there. Thank you. Right, we move on to our next question. This is just the second come through, actually. Is it globally accepted to start the second innings for women? What are all the pros and cons of the same? I'm just wondering whether you understand that the second innings for women, I'm presuming, oh, yeah, here we go. Here's the rest of it. Right, here we go. Are AECOM, or are you inviting women to start the second innings or rejoining after taking a career break due to personal issues? Is that something that's quite common now or not?
So I can answer from a personal and then probably also from an AECOM perspective there. It is the whole second innings, the going back to work after you've then had children, it's a tricky thing to do. I myself have 2 children. They're absolutely wonderful boys. They're now 7 and 9. I'll pretend I didn't have to think for a second there to remember how old they are. But it is very difficult in the form of industry that we work on to keep, if you want to take a couple of years off in order to look after your children, especially when they're in a young age. It's tricky to stay up in the forefront of all the technologies which are being developed and things like that. It is possible, but it isn't always easy. There are allowances. Some companies are better than others that can be made in order to do so. Certainly, I had my children while I was working for AECOM. Obviously, you get the maternity leave, but then when I didn't take a prolonged time off, I took the maternity leave. I took, in the end, I think it was about 5 months. But then I came back at reduced hours for many years afterwards. So that allowed me, I was working a 6-hour day instead of an 8 or 9-hour day. And that just gave me the opportunity to be around a little bit more in the afternoons for my children and be able to interact with them. So I think it isn't something easy to do. It is very easy to end up feeling that you're failing across the board. You're failing at being a mom, you're failing at working, you're failing at all of that. The pressure is immense. But I think it's important to find your own balance, decide what it is you want to do. And it's not insurmountable. You can take a couple of years off, or you can work through it full time, or even at a reduced hours. But I think one of the main things that you have to remember is not feel guilt about whatever solution you found that works for you. Because we have a tendency to pile on the mom guilt and to pile on the guilt for so many things that we maybe are not superwoman. And nobody is. So you're not being fair to yourself if you're being guilty. You have to do the best that you can.
And it really is a very personal choice, isn't it? But having the flexibility is definitely something that it's very nice to have as well, of course. We move on now to our final question. Do you think there's anything that academic institutions and industry associations can do better, in fact, in terms of empowering students and women members? Because I was reading actually recently that at a very early age now, girls are very much encouraged to study STEAM subjects, aren't they? And so it's that sort of like starting right from the bottom and encouraging girls to get into that sort of those types of subjects, for example, is, a good place to start anyway.
So that that's unfortunately one of my favorite hobby horses, because I get very frustrated when I walk into a toy shop and half of it is colored pink and that's got all the dolls in, and half of it's colored blue and that's got the Lego and things like that. And I'm a firm believer that right from a very early age, you should expose children to a wide range of toys. Boys should play with dolls, girls should be able to play with Lego. It's ridiculous to try and impose kinds of differences at that age and try and set gender restrictions. So when it gets to now you're in school and you're starting to choose subjects, I think it very much depends on where you are, whether it is now yet completely open. I think there is still, certainly even within South Africa, which is obviously where I know best, there is definitely still stigma relating to people not necessarily, girls choosing boys' courses like engineering in order to be able to do. And that's something that we try very hard to break. So when the various institutions go out and talk to the schools, and not just at the end of high school, because they've chosen their subjects a long time ago, but early high school, in primary school, when they're much younger and they're looking, you need to make sure that at that stage children aren't getting their horizons narrowed already just by what they're hearing from the people around them. So it's very important to keep the options open so that they can make informed choices the whole way through. And I'm not for one moment saying that everybody should be forced to choose engineering, although, I love it. I know it's not everybody else's cup of tea, but you should at least have the option to choose it and not be prevented from choosing it due to gender or race or any other reason.
So is there anything in terms of, empowering students and women members that you think needs to be a priority?
So I think the encouragement is good. To me, I think within a tertiary institution format, it would be best to actually normalize it as much as possible. So a woman studying engineering should not be an alien thing. It should be just natural. You're all students studying engineering. You should be working in groups of mixed genders so that you learn at that stage how to interact with each other, so that you're not later on in the engineering environment now suddenly trying to deal with sort of gender segregation from your own bias from the past. So I think very much make an effort to try and firstly encourage women to join engineering, definitely, and do various outreaches to the schools. But then once you've actually got them in the tertiary institutions, mix it up a bit, mix and match. Don't make a massive thing about, oh yes, you are the woman in the class. They will know when they're only one of a few women in a large class. I think we were about, actually it wasn't too bad. It was about 8 women out of 60 or so people in our class. So, and that was better than the previous years. So, but you make, if people feel that they are comfortable in what they're doing and that they are welcome and not being biased against, then you can sit in an even springboard and go from there. Then everyone has their opportunity to shine, whether they're male or female.
Agreed. Well, sadly, we have run out of time. Timm, it's been absolutely delightful speaking with you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. A great session there on women in construction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, very much.
And well, sadly, that is all we have time for today. What an excellent day we've had so far. And thank you so much to each and every one of you for joining us all here today. Now, just before we go, I actually have some key takeaways from today's sessions. First up, there is an increased drive from the construction sector in the MENA region for sustainable development. At a global level, the infrastructure sector is expected to be the most rapidly growing sector through to 2030. Now, we also need to leverage the built environments to be vehicles to absorb carbon whilst providing the right conditions for communities. And finally, as we just heard, women in the industry need to make sure that male colleagues are championing women's rights. Well, what a brilliant first day during the Big 5 Online Reconnect tomorrow. We're going to hear about the event findings from the Big 5 Future Tech Summit held in September, the project outlook for the MENA region and the future of engineering and embracing the next generation of architects. We very much look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, starting from 11 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. Thank you so much.